Michael Clark, a 35-year-old financial analyst from Chicago, believed he had life figured out. Married for 7 years to Emily, a 33-year-old marketing specialist, their world revolved around a cozy suburban home in Oak Park, morning jogs along Lake Michigan, and dreams of a future with kids and a lake house. Their marriage wasn't perfect. Whose is? But it was solid, built on shared laughs, late-night talks, and a proposal Michael still replayed in his mind. Emily's eyes sparkling under the fairy lights at Millennium Park when she whispered, yes. They were a team, or so he thought. That crisp October evening, the kitchen smelled of roasted garlic and rosemary from the steak Emily had cooked. The soft hum of a Cubs game on the TV filled the background as they sat at their oak dining table, a wedding gift from Michael's parents. Emily poured herself a second glass of Pinot Noir, her movements deliberate, almost theatrical. Michael was halfway through his mashed potatoes when she said it. Her voice as casual as if she were mentioning a new coffee shop. On Friday, I'm going out to dinner with Tom. You know, my colleague from work. Michael froze, his fork hovering midair. The words hit like a rogue wave, sudden and disorienting. He blinked, waiting for the punchline, the giggle. Anything to signal this was one of Emily's teasing games. She loved to poke at him, little tests to see if he'd flinch, like when she'd forget to tell him about a work trip until the last minute. But this was different. Emily didn't laugh. She didn't even look at him. She just sliced into her steak, the knife gliding through with unnerving precision. What? Michael's voice came out low, steadier than he felt. His heart gave a sharp thud, but he kept his face neutral. He wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of seeing him rattled. Not yet. Emily glanced up, her hazel eyes catching the light from the pendant lamp. It's just dinner, Michael, she said, shrugging lightly. Tom's been working on the same campaign as me. We're just grabbing a bite to talk shop. It doesn't change anything between us. She paused, her lips curving into a faint smile. I love you. That smile, it wasn't warm. It was calculated, like she'd rehearsed this moment. Michael's grip on his fork tightened, but he forced himself to set it down slowly. He knew Emily. 7 years of marriage, countless arguments, and makeups had taught him her tells. The way her left eyebrow twitched when she was nervous, the slight tilt of her head when she was hiding something. Right now, her posture was too perfect, her tone too breezy. This wasn't about dinner. This was a move in a game he hadn't realized they were playing. Tom, Michael repeated, leaning back in his chair. He crossed his arms, studying her. The guy who keeps texting you about deadlines at 9 p.m.? Emily's smile flickered, just for a split second, but Michael caught it. Exactly, she said, recovering quickly. He's just a co-worker. You're making it sound like a big deal. Am I? Michael raised an eyebrow, his voice calm, but edged with something sharper. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't begging. That's what she expected, wasn't it? For him to unravel, to demand answers, to show her how much her words stung. But Michael had learned long ago to keep his emotions in check. Growing up with a father who'd shout over spilled milk taught him that losing control meant losing the upper hand. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Emily sipped her wine, her eyes darting to her plate, avoiding his gaze. Michael's mind raced. Was she serious? Was this a test? Or, his stomach twisted at the thought, was she actually planning to step out on him? The Emily he knew, the one who'd cried during their vows, wouldn't do this. But the woman across from him, with her cool detachment, felt like a stranger. Okay, he said finally, his tone almost bored. He picked up his glass of water, took a slow sip, and washed her over the rim. So, you're going out with Tom. Cool. Should I expect you home late? Emily's fingers paused on her wine glass. She hadn't expected that. Her lips parted, but no words came out for a moment. Probably, she said, her voice less certain now. It's just dinner, like I said. Right, just dinner. Michael nodded, a small, unreadable smile tugging at his lips. Inside, his chest burned, but he leaned into the discomfort. If Emily wanted to play this game, he'd play too, and he'd play to win. Well, have fun. Her eyes narrowed slightly, searching his face for a crack in his composure. Michael held her gaze, unflinching. He could see it now. She wasn't just testing his reaction. She wanted to see how far she could push him, how much he'd tolerate. But what she didn't know was that Michael had already decided. He wasn't going to break. Not tonight. Not ever. As Emily pushed her plate away and stood to clear the table, Michael stayed seated, his mind already working through the next move. The Cubs game droned on in the background, but the real game was happening right here in their quiet kitchen. And Michael Clark was ready to turn the tables. The air in the Clark household felt heavier after that fateful dinner. Michael woke the next morning to the familiar scent of brewed coffee, but the routine normalcy was a lie. Emily was already at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone, her blonde hair pulled into a messy bun. She greeted him with a quick morning, but her eyes didn't meet his. Michael poured himself a mug, his movements deliberate, and leaned against the counter, watching her. He'd spent half the night replaying her words. "I'm going out with Tom." The casual delivery, the faint challenge in her smile. It wasn't just a statement. It was a gauntlet thrown down. Michael knew Emily's games. She'd always tested boundaries, like when she'd jokingly flirt with a bartender to see if he'd get jealous or pretend to forget their anniversary to gauge his reaction. He'd always laughed it off, chalking it up to her playful nature. But this time, the stakes were different. This wasn't about a fleeting moment of attention. This was about their marriage, their trust, and Michael wasn't about to let her win by default. He took a sip of coffee, the bitterness grounding him. "So," he said, his tone light, "you and Tom still on for Friday?" Emily's fingers paused on her phone. She glanced up, her expression carefully neutral. "Yeah," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Why?" Michael shrugged, setting his mug down with a soft clink. "Just curious. Thought I might make plans too." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "There's this trainer at the gym, Sarah. We've been chatting a lot lately. Maybe I'll grab a drink with her." The shift in Emily's demeanor was subtle, but unmistakable. Her shoulders stiffened, and her lips pressed into a thin line before she forced a smile. "Sarah," she repeated, her voice a touch too bright. "Didn't know you were so chatty at the gym." "Oh, Michael said, crossing his arms with a casual grin. "She's cool. Gives great workout tips. Figured it might be fun to hang out." He watched her closely, noting the way her fingers tightened around her phone. Emily was good at hiding her emotions, but not from him. Not after 7 years. "That's nice," she said, her smile faltering. She stood, grabbing her empty mug and moving to the sink, her movements jerky. "I've got a meeting. See you tonight." Michael nodded, saying nothing as she hurried out of the kitchen. The door clicked shut behind her, and he exhaled, his calm facade masking the storm inside. He'd planted a seed, and Emily's reaction confirmed what he'd suspected. She hadn't expected him to push back. She wanted him to unravel, beg, argue, maybe even forbid her from going out. But Michael wasn't that guy. If this was a game, he'd play it smarter. Over the next 2 days, the tension in their Oak Park home thickened. Emily kept up her act, mentioning Tom in passing, how he'd recommended a new Italian place, how he was so easy to talk to. Each comment was a jab, designed to provoke. Michael didn't bite. Instead, he mirrored her, dropping hints about Sarah. "She sent me a playlist for my runs," he'd say offhandedly, or "Sarah thinks I should try kickboxing." Emily's responses grew shorter, her laughs more forced. She was unraveling, and Michael felt a strange mix of satisfaction and unease. Thursday night, they sat on the couch, a Netflix show playing but ignored. Emily's leg bounced slightly, a nervous tick Michael hadn't seen in years. He glanced at her, then reached for his phone, typing out a quick message before setting it face down. The notification pinged almost instantly, and he smiled, just enough for her to notice. "Who's that?" Emily asked, her voice sharp despite her attempt to sound casual. "Just Sarah," Michael replied, stretching his arms behind his head. "She's got a wicked sense of humor." Emily's jaw tightened. She opened her mouth, then closed it, grabbing the remote and turning up the volume. Michael leaned back, his heart pounding, but his face serene. He was winning this round, but the victory felt hollow. Was Emily really planning to go through with her dinner? Or was this all a bluff to make him crack? The uncertainty gnawed at him, but he refused to show it. Later, as they brushed their teeth side by side, Emily broke the silence. "You're really okay with me going out tomorrow?" Her voice was softer now, almost vulnerable, but Michael caught the edge beneath it, a test within a test. He rinsed his toothbrush, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "You said it's just dinner, right? I trust you." The lie tasted bitter, but he sold it with a shrug. "Besides, I might be busy myself." Emily's reflection stared back, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Michael thought she might call it off, admit this was all a mistake. But she just nodded, turning away. Good, she murmured, heading to bed. As Michael lay in the dark, the weight of their game pressed down on him. Emily was testing his limits, but she'd underestimated him. Tomorrow was Friday, and Michael had a plan, not to beg or fight, but to turn her own tactics against her. If Emily wanted to play with fire, he'd show her how it felt to get burned. But deep down, a small voice whispered, "What if this isn't a game?" He pushed it aside. He'd find out soon enough. The Chicago skyline glittered through the window of the Clark's Oak Park home, but inside, the atmosphere was anything but serene. By Thursday, the game between Michael and Emily had escalated into a silent war of nerves. Every word, every glance was a calculated move, and Michael could feel the tension coiling tighter with each passing hour. Emily's announcement about her dinner with Tom hung over them like a storm cloud, and Michael's counterplay, his invented interest in Sarah, the gym trainer, had shifted the power dynamic. But the victory was bittersweet. He was winning, yet the cost was a growing unease that this wasn't just a test anymore. Michael leaned into his strategy, doubling down on the subtle changes he'd started. He swapped his usual button-downs for a fitted navy blazer, bought a new cologne with a sharper, woodsy scent, and spent an extra minute in front of the mirror each morning, adjusting his hair with a care he hadn't shown in years. Emily noticed. He caught her watching him as he tied his shoes, her hazel eyes narrowing when he flashed a quick smile at a text that didn't exist. The phone had become his greatest prop, pinging with messages from Sarah at just the right moments, each one chipping away at Emily's composure. Friday morning, the kitchen was a battlefield disguised as routine. Emily sipped her latte, her posture stiff as she scrolled through her tablet. Michael poured his coffee, humming a tune he knew she didn't recognize. "Big day today," he said casually, leaning against the counter. "You excited for your dinner with Tom?" Emily's fingers froze on the screen. She looked up, her smile tight. "Sure," she said, her voice clipped. "It's just a work thing, like I said. You're still okay with it?" Michael tilted his head, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make her squirm. "Why wouldn't I be?" he replied, his tone light, but his eyes locked on hers. "You do, you am. How about my own plans?" Her lips parted, but she caught herself, forcing a laugh. "Right. Sarah, huh? You two seem close." The word came out sharp, like she was probing for a weak spot. Michael shrugged, sipping his coffee. "She's fun. Keeps things interesting." He set the mug down and grabbed his keys, tossing them in the air and catching them with a grin. "See you tonight. Or, maybe later." Emily's forced smile faltered as he walked out. Michael felt her eyes on his back, and for the first time, he sensed genuine fear beneath her bravado. She wasn't just testing him anymore. She was worried. The thought sent a jolt of satisfaction through him, but it was tinged with dread. What if she went through with it? What if Tom wasn't a bluff? At work, Michael's focus was shot. Spreadsheets blurred on his monitor as his mind churned. Emily's behavior didn't add up. She'd always been the one to push boundaries, but this felt different, bolder, riskier. He replayed their 7 years together, the late nights building their life, the fights they'd survived, the promises they'd made. Could she really throw that away for a colleague? Or was this her way of shaking him up, forcing him to prove something? The uncertainty was maddening, but he refused to crack. That evening, Michael upped the ante. He came home with a new leather jacket, the kind he'd never have worn before, and made a show of checking his phone while Emily cooked. She burned the chicken, a rare misstep, and snapped at him when he offered to help. "I've got it," she said, her voice tight. Michael just nodded, hiding his amusement. She was unraveling, and he hadn't even done anything yet. Later, as they sat at the dining table, the silence was deafening. Emily pushed her food around her plate, her leg bouncing under the table, a nervous tick Michael hadn't seen since their early days, when she'd worried he might not propose. He decided to twist the knife. "Sarah's been talking about this new bar downtown," he said, cutting into his chicken. "Sounds like a vibe. Maybe I'll check it out tomorrow." Emily's fork clattered against her plate. She recovered quickly, but her eyes betrayed her, wide, searching, almost desperate. "Tomorrow," she echoed. "I thought you were just talking." Michael leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Talking's fun, but why stop there? You're going out with Tom, right? Fair's fair." He watched her closely, noting the slight tremor in her hand as she reached for her wineglass. For a moment, he almost felt guilty. "Almost. You don't seem like the type to do that," Emily said, her voice softer now, testing the waters. Go out with someone else, I mean. Michael raised an eyebrow, his smile sharp. Funny. I didn't think you were either. The words landed like a punch, and Emily's face paled. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. For the first time, Michael saw it, doubt. Not just in him, but in herself. Her plan, whatever it was backfiring. The rest of the meal passed in strained silence. Emily cleared the table with jerky movements, her usual grace gone. Michael stayed seated, scrolling through his phone, pretending to text. He could feel her stealing glances, trying to read him, but he gave her nothing. Inside, his heart raced. Tomorrow was the day, her dinner with Tom, his supposed plans with Sarah. He didn't know how far she'd go, but he knew one thing. He wasn't backing down. If Emily wanted to play this game, he'd make sure she felt every move. As they climbed into bed that night, the space between them felt like a chasm. Emily turned away, her breathing uneven. Michael stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. He'd pushed her to the edge, but the question lingered. Was this still a game? Or had they crossed a line they couldn't uncross? Tomorrow would tell. Friday arrived in Chicago like a held breath, the autumn air sharp and the streets buzzing with evening plans. In the Clark household, the tension that had simmered all week was now a rolling boil. Michael woke to find Emily already gone, her side of the bed cold, a post-it on the fridge reading, "Early meeting. Back later." No mention of her dinner with Tom, no acknowledgement of the fault line cracking through their marriage. Michael stared at the note, his jaw tight. This was it, the day their game would either end or destroy them. He moved through his morning with precision, channeling his restless energy into strategy. At work, his colleagues noticed a change. Michael, usually reserved, was sharper, more charismatic, his new leather jacket and confident stride turning heads. But his mind was elsewhere, replaying every moment of the past week. Emily's cool announcement, her faltering confidence, the way her eyes betrayed panic when he mentioned Sarah. He'd push her to the brink, but tonight he'd finish it. Not with anger or ultimatums, but with a move she'd never see coming. Back home, Michael upped the ante. He showered, swapped his work attire for a tailored black shirt and dark jeans, and spritzed on the new cologne Emily had side-eyed all week. He caught his reflection in the hall mirror, taller, somehow, his hazel eyes steady with purpose. His phone buzzed with a text from a coworker, but he let it sit, knowing Emily would assume it was Sarah. Every detail was a weapon now, and he wielded them with care. Emily returned at 6, her heels clicking on the hardwood. She stopped short in the living room, her purse slipping slightly in her grip as she took in Michael's appearance. "You're going out?" she asked, her voice tight, the question laced with something that wasn't quite fear, but wasn't far off. Michael flashed a half-smile, adjusting his cuff. "Yeah, thought I'd check out that bar Sarah mentioned. You're off to see Tom, right?" His tone was light, almost indifferent, but his eyes locked on hers, watching for the crack. Emily's lips parted, but she caught herself, forcing a nod. "Right, just dinner." She turned to the kitchen, her movements jerky, and poured a glass of water she didn't drink. Michael noted the tremor in her hand, the way her gaze darted to his phone on the counter. She was unraveling, and he hadn't even left yet. "Cool," he said, grabbing his keys. "Have fun." He walked out, the door clicking shut behind him, leaving Emily in a house that suddenly felt too quiet. He didn't go far, just to his car, where he sat for a moment, heart pounding. This was the riskiest part of his plan. He wasn't meeting anyone. Sarah didn't exist. But Emily didn't know that, and the uncertainty was his leverage. Meanwhile, Emily paced the living room, her phone clutched like a lifeline. She'd texted Tom earlier, canceling their dinner with a vague excuse about a headache. The truth was, she couldn't go through with it. Not with Michael acting like a stranger, not with the gnawing fear that he was slipping away. She sank onto the couch, scrolling through their old photos, her chest tight. This was supposed to be a test, a way to spark his passion, to make him fight for her. But now, she was the one fighting against the dread that she'd pushed him too far. Hours crawled by. Emily tried to distract herself with the show, but the laugh track grated. She checked her phone obsessively, half expecting a text from Michael, half dreading it. At 10 p.m., she poured a glass of wine, then another, her leg bouncing as she stared at the door. Where was he? Was he laughing with Sarah, his hand brushing hers, his smile, the one she'd always claimed as hers, now aimed at someone else? The images clawed at her, each one worse than the last. Just before midnight, the lock clicked. Michael stepped inside, his expression calm, almost serene. Emily shot up from the couch, her wine glass nearly tipping. "You're back," she said, her voice a mix of relief and accusation. How was it?" Michael hung his jacket, taking his time. He turned to her, his gaze steady. "It was good," he said simply, then paused, letting the silence stretch. Emily's face paled, her eyes wide with a vulnerability he hadn't seen in years. He stepped closer, his voice softening but firm. "Actually, Emily, there's something you need to know." She froze, bracing herself. Michael leaned against the counter, his eyes never leaving hers. "There is no Sarah," he said. "Never was. I made her up. I wanted you to feel what I felt when you said you were going out with Tom. That gut punch, that doubt. I needed you to understand what you were risking." Emily's breath caught, her hand flying to her mouth. Relief flooded her face, but it was short-lived, replaced by a dawning horror. You lied?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Michael nodded, his expression unreadable. "Just like you did. Because you weren't really going out with Tom, were you?" It wasn't a question. He'd seen the signs, her canceled plans, her panic. He'd called her bluff. Emily sank back onto the couch, her face crumpling. I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said, her voice barely audible. "I just wanted to see if you still cared." Michael's heart twisted, but he held his ground. "I cared," he said quietly. "But you played with that, Em. You gambled with us." He let the weight of his words settle, watching as tears welled in her eyes. The game was over, and the truth lay bare. But the cost was still unclear, and, as Michael stood there, he wondered if they could ever rebuild what they'd broken. The Chicago night was still, the hum of distant traffic barely penetrating the suffocating silence of the Clark household. Michael stood in the living room, his arms crossed, his gaze fixed on Emily, who sat crumpled on the couch, her face a mask of regret and shock. The revelation had landed like a grenade. There was no Sarah, no rival stealing his attention. Michael had crafted the illusion to mirror Emily's game, to make her feel the sting of betrayal she'd so casually inflicted. Now, with the truth exposed, the air crackled with the wreckage of their 7-year marriage. Emily's eyes, red-rimmed and glistening, searched his face for a lifeline. "Michael, I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought if I pushed you, you'd show me you still loved me, that you'd fight for us." She clutched a throw pillow, her knuckles white. "It was stupid. I see that now." Michael's jaw tightened, but his expression remained steady, almost detached. He'd spent the week mastering his emotions, and he wasn't about to unravel now. "You thought lying about a date with Tom would make me love you more?" he said, his voice low, cutting. "You gambled with our trust, Em. You didn't just push me. You pushed us to the edge." Emily flinched, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I didn't go through with it," she said, her words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "I canceled with Tom. I couldn't do it. I was scared, okay? Scared you were moving on, that I'd lose you." She stood, taking a tentative step toward him, her hands outstretched. "We can fix this. I'll do anything." Michael held up a hand, stopping her. The gesture was gentle but firm, a wall she couldn't cross. "This isn't about fixing," he said. "It's about what you broke." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "I spent years building a life with you. Every fight, every laugh, every promise. And you decided to test that, like it was a game you could win or lose without consequences." Emily's shoulders shook, her breath hitching. "I know I messed up," she said. "But I love you, Michael. Doesn't that count for something?" He looked at her, really looked, and for a moment he saw the woman he'd proposed under the fairy lights at Millennium Park, the one who'd laughed through their first disastrous attempt at cooking Thanksgiving dinner. But that Emily felt like a memory, overshadowed by the woman who'd sat across from him a week ago, coolly announcing her dinner with Tom, daring him to crack. The love was still there, buried deep, but it was tangled in a truth he couldn't ignore. She'd chosen manipulation over trust. "It counts," Michael said finally, his voice softer but resolute. "But it's not enough." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded stack of papers, placing them on the coffee table with a quiet thud. Emily's eyes widened, her breath catching as she recognized the divorce filing, his signature already scrawled at the bottom. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "Michael, please. We could go to counseling, take a trip, anything. Don't do this. Her voice cracked, raw with panic, but Michael didn't waver. I'm not doing this to punish you, he said, meeting her gaze. I'm doing it for me. I deserve a life where I don't have to wonder if my partner's testing me, where trust isn't a chessboard. He stepped back, the distance between them a chasm now. You taught me that, Emily. Thank you. The words hit harder than any shout, and Emily sank back onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. Michael turned, grabbing his jacket from the chair. He didn't look back as he walked to the door, the click of the lock echoing like a final note. Outside, the cool night air hit him, grounding him. He stood on the porch of their Oak Park home, the place where they'd planned a future, and felt a strange clarity. The pain was there, sharp and real, but so was something new. Freedom. In the weeks that followed, Michael moved into a small apartment downtown, the city's pulse a reminder of possibilities. He threw himself into work, joined a new gym, not for show, but for himself, and started running along the lakefront again, each step a reclaiming of who he was. Friends noticed the change, the quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. He wasn't broken. He was rebuilt. Emily, meanwhile, stayed in the house, surrounded by memories that now felt like ghosts. She tried reaching out, leaving voicemails Michael didn't return, sending texts that went unanswered. The divorce papers sat signed on her desk, a daily reminder of the cost of her game. She started therapy, grappling with why she'd felt the need to test him, why control had mattered more than love. The answers were slow, painful, but they were hers to face alone. The moral was clear, etched in the ruins of their marriage. Trust is not a toy. Games with someone's heart carry a price, and Emily paid it with the loss of the man she'd underestimated. Michael, in choosing himself, found a strength he hadn't known he had. As Chicago's skyline glowed against the night, he walked forward, ready for whatever came next, knowing one truth above all: some games aren't worth playing